Commander Zethkara of the Hegemony Council stared at the holographic display with all four of her eyes, each one blinking in a different rhythm as her anxiety mounted. The blue-scaled Vordhak had seen many species rise and fall in her 3 centuries of service, but nothing had prepared her for the reports flooding in from the Outer Rim territories. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority that had earned her the respect of 17 different alien species across the galactic community. Lieutenant Veximel, a insectoid Chithari, clicked his mandibles nervously before responding. "Ma'am, we've lost contact with mining stations Alpha 7 through Delta 12. That's 43 facilities across 8 star systems in the past rotation cycle." Zethkara's tail twitched with irritation. The mining stations were crucial to the Hegemony's resource network, each one protected by automated defense systems and staffed by hundreds of workers from various member species. For them to simply vanish without so much as a distress signal was unprecedented. "Pirates?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Negative, Commander. No known pirate faction has this kind of capability. The stations weren't just raided, they were completely obliterated. Nothing left but debris and radiation signatures we've never seen before." The holographic display shifted to show tactical readouts from the affected systems. Each mining station had been reduced to floating scrap metal, the destruction so complete that forensic teams couldn't even determine what weapons had been used. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Hegemony's vast databases. "What about survivors?" Zethkara asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer. "That's the strange part, ma'am. We found escape pods from 3 of the stations. The occupants were alive but changed." "Changed how?" Veximel's compound eyes darkened. "They speak of creatures they call humans. Small, bipedal mammals with pale skin and strange facial hair." "But, Commander, there's no record of any species matching that description in our databases. The survivors claim these humans move like shadows, strike without warning, and show no mercy to anyone who stands in their way." Zethkara had heard enough ghost stories in her time to dismiss such claims, but the destruction of 43 mining stations was very real. She activated her personal communication device and contacted High Admiral Krexthon of the Hegemony Fleet. "Admiral, I'm transmitting the tactical data from the Outer Rim incidents. We need a battle group deployed immediately to investigate these attacks." The Admiral's gravelly voice crackled through the speaker. "Already en route, Commander. Battle Group 77 departed 2 hours ago under Captain Yolandra. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and the dreadnought Inevitable Dominion. Whatever's out there won't stand against that kind of firepower." Zethkara felt a measure of relief. Battle Group 77 was one of the Hegemony's most experienced units, veterans of the Sector Wars and the Rebellion of the Outer Colonies. If anyone could handle this mysterious threat, it would be them. 3 days later, Captain Yolandra stood on the bridge of the Inevitable Dominion, her 6-armed hexapod frame tense with anticipation. The massive dreadnought, 2 kilometers of advanced alien engineering, led the battle group through hyperspace toward the Kepler 442 system, site of the most recent attack. "Dropping to sublight in 30 seconds, announced the navigation officer. Yolandra activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to encounter an unknown hostile force responsible for the destruction of multiple Hegemony installations. Maintain battle readiness and remember your training. Whatever we're facing, the combined might of the Hegemony fleet has never failed to protect our citizens." The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, sensors immediately sweeping the system for any sign of the attackers. What they found instead was a graveyard. The mining station that had once orbited the system's 3rd planet was gone, replaced by a slowly expanding cloud of metallic debris. But more disturbing were the ships floating among the wreckage, vessels of a design completely unknown to Hegemony records. "Captain," called the sensor operator, "I'm detecting 57 ships of unknown configuration. They appear to be powered down, drifting among the debris field." Yolandra studied the tactical display. The alien ships were sleek and angular, nothing like the organic curves favored by most galactic civilizations. Their hulls seemed to absorb sensor waves rather than reflect them, making detailed scans difficult. "Size comparison?" "Varied classes, Captain. The largest measures approximately 800 meters. Much smaller than our dreadnought, but there are significantly more of them. Any response to our hails? Negative. No communication signals detected. Yalandra made her decision. Battle Group, assume attack formation Delta. Target the unknown vessels and prepare to fire on my command. The hegemony ships moved into position, their weapons systems charging with the distinctive hum of gravitic cannons and plasma torpedoes. For a moment, the only sound on the bridge was the gentle vibration of the ship's engines. Then, everything changed. The alien ships came alive simultaneously, their engines igniting with a brilliant blue-white flare that momentarily overwhelmed the inevitable Dominion sensors. But what happened next defied every principle of space combat the hegemony had learned over centuries of warfare. The unknown vessels didn't charge forward in a traditional attack formation. Instead, they scattered like a flock of startled birds, each ship taking a seemingly random vector that somehow managed to avoid the targeting solutions of every hegemony weapon system. What are they doing? Yalandra demanded. Her tactical officer, a cybernetic-enhanced Kelleran, frantically worked his controls. I don't understand it, Captain. Their movement patterns are completely chaotic, yet they're avoiding our target locks with impossible precision. The first human ship struck the heavy cruiser Resolution like a missile, but, instead of exploding on impact, it somehow managed to breach the shields and latch onto the hull. Within seconds, multiple smaller craft had swarmed the cruiser, and the ship's communication system erupted with panicked voices. This is Resolution. We're being boarded. Unknown hostiles have breached decks 7 through 12. They're moving through the ship like they know our layout better than we do. Yalandra watched in horror as the same thing happened to 3 more ships in her fleet. The human vessels moved with an agility that should have been impossible for ships of their size, dodging between the massive hegemony dreadnoughts and cruisers like predators hunting much larger prey. All ships, concentrate fire on grid 77 Alpha, she commanded. The combined firepower of the hegemony fleet lit up space with energy beams and explosive projectiles, but the human ships seemed to anticipate every shot. They moved in 3 dimensions simultaneously, using the gravitational fields of nearby planets and even the hegemony ships themselves to alter their trajectories in ways that made targeting nearly impossible. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Resolution. Audio only. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything in Yalandra's experience. It was harsh and guttural, speaking in a language that the ship's translation systems struggled to process. Hegemony vessels, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Colonial Defense Force. You have entered human territorial space without authorization and have been classified as hostile. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Yalandra's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Human territorial space? This system has been under hegemony protection for over 2 centuries. Not anymore, came the reply. Your time of expansion at the expense of others is over. We've seen what you do to species that can't defend themselves. We've seen the slave colonies, the resource extraction operations, the forced relocations. It ends now. You're making a mistake, Yalandra said, trying to maintain her authority even as her fleet continued to take heavy losses. The hegemony brings peace and prosperity to the galaxy. We offer protection and guidance to lesser species. The human's laugh was cold and bitter. Protection? Is that what you call strip mining a world until it's lifeless? Guidance? Is that what you call forcing entire populations to work in your factories until they die of exhaustion? Before Yalandra could respond, the tactical display showed something that made her blood freeze. The heavy cruiser Resolution had gone dark, its engines offline and its weapons silent. But, worse than that, she could see movement through the ship's transparent aluminum viewports. Small figures in dark armor moving through the corridors with purpose and efficiency. How did they take a heavy cruiser in less than 10 minutes, she whispered. Her tactical officer looked up from his console, all 3 of his eyes wide with fear. Captain, I'm analyzing the boarding action from sensor data. These humans, they're not using conventional weapons. They seem to know exactly where every vital system is located, exactly how to disable our defensive measures. It's like they've been studying our technology for years. The truth was far worse than that, though Yolandra didn't know it yet. Humanity had been studying them for decades, ever since first contact had gone horribly wrong in a distant system on the edge of what the hegemony considered civilized space. 37 years earlier, the exploration ship Endeavour had made humanity's first contact with an alien civilization when they encountered a hegemony survey vessel in the Proxima Centauri system. Captain Michael Torres had approached with every protocol for peaceful first contact that Earth's diplomats had developed, broadcasting messages of friendship in dozens of languages and mathematical sequences. The hegemony survey ship had responded by opening fire. Torres and his crew had barely escaped, but not before they'd managed to record everything. The alien ship had powerful weapons, advanced shielding, and technology that was centuries ahead of anything Earth possessed. But, more importantly, they had also intercepted communications between the survey ship and its command structure. Through painstaking analysis and code-breaking, human linguists had eventually translated those communications. What they found had changed the course of human history forever. The hegemony wasn't just another spacefaring civilization. They were conquerors who viewed any species they encountered as either useful slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. Their protection of lesser species was actually a sophisticated system of exploitation that had been refined over millennia. Worse yet, the communications revealed that Earth had already been marked for integration into the hegemony. Survey ships were already en route to human space, and military forces would follow soon after. That discovery had triggered the largest mobilization in human history. Every nation on Earth had contributed to a crash program to develop space-based defenses and offensive capabilities. The best military minds, the most brilliant scientists, and the most dedicated engineers had worked around the clock for 4 decades to prepare for the war they knew was coming. But humans had one advantage the hegemony had never encountered before. They were the first species in galactic history to know what was coming and have time to prepare for it. Back in the Kepler 442 system, the battle was going even worse for the hegemony fleet. 3 more heavy cruisers had been boarded and captured, their crews either killed or taken prisoner. The human ships moved like a coordinated swarm, each one seeming to anticipate the actions of their allies with perfect precision. "Captain," the sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting massive power buildup in the lead human vessel. Whatever they're charging, it's unlike anything in our databases." Yolandra stared at the tactical display as the largest human ship, a sleek predator of metal and composite materials, began to glow with an eerie blue light. Energy readings were climbing beyond anything the inevitable Dominion sensors could measure. "All ships, emergency scatter pattern. Get us away from that vessel now." But it was too late. The human ship fired something that wasn't quite a weapon in any conventional sense. Instead of a beam of energy or a projectile, it released what looked like a wave of distorted space itself. The wave expanded outward at the speed of light, and anything it touched simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not vaporized. Simply gone, as if it had never been there at all. The wave caught 2 of the hegemony destroyers before they could escape its radius. One moment they were there, their crews frantically trying to flee, and the next moment there was nothing but empty space where 2,000-ton warships had been. What in the name of the ancestors was that? Yolandra breathed. Her science officer, a pale Etherian whose species was renowned for their understanding of advanced physics, was staring at his readings in disbelief. "Captain, the weapon seems to generate a localized field that disrupts the fundamental forces holding matter together. It's not just destroying the ships, it's making them cease to exist on a quantum level." The implications of such technology were staggering. If these humans could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself, then everything the hegemony thought they knew about warfare had just become obsolete. "Signal the fleet," Yolandra ordered, her voice heavy with defeat. "General retreat to hyperspace. We need to warn command about what we're facing." But, as her ships prepared to jump to safety, the human commander's voice came through the communication system one last time. "Captain Yolandra of the inevitable Dominion. Tell your superiors that this is what happens when you threaten Earth and her colonies. Tell them that humanity remembers every world you've strip-mined, every species you've enslaved, every civilization you've destroyed in the name of your so-called order. The transmission paused, and, when it resumed, the human's voice carried a promise that made Yolandra's scales ripple with involuntary fear. "Tell them that we're coming for all of it. Every slave world will be freed, every exploitation facility will be destroyed, and every hegemony official responsible for crimes against sentient beings will face justice. The age of hegemony dominion is over." As the surviving ships of Battle Group 77 jumped to hyperspace, carrying word of humanity's declaration of war back to the Hegemony Council, none of them realized they were being followed. In the wake of their hyperspace signatures, dozens of smaller human ships shadowed their course, invisible to hegemony sensors and carrying out reconnaissance missions that would map every hegemony stronghold, every military base, and every slave colony across 1,000 light-years of space. The galaxy had lived under hegemony rule for over 3,000 years, growing comfortable in the belief that the strongest always ruled the weak. But now something new had emerged from the darkness between the stars, something that didn't follow the old rules. Humanity had spent 40 years preparing for this war, and they intended to win it not through superior numbers or advanced technology alone, but through something the hegemony had never encountered: the fury of a species that refused to accept that might made right. The first phase of the war was over, but, for the hegemony, the nightmare was just beginning. High Admiral Crexthon stood before the assembled Hegemony Council, his usually immaculate uniform wrinkled from 3 days of constant crisis management. The massive amphitheater that housed the council was filled with representatives from 47 member species, their varied forms creating a rainbow of scales, chitin, fur, and synthetic materials. But, today, instead of the usual political debates and trade negotiations, fear hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "Honored council members," Crexthon began, his voice carrying across the chamber through translator devices, "I bring grave news from the Outer Rim territories. We face a threat unlike anything in our recorded history." The holographic displays around the chamber activated, showing the tactical data from the battle at Kepler 442. Many of the council members had already seen the reports, but watching the destruction of a hegemony battle group in real time still sent waves of shock through the assembly. Counselor Prime Thexandra, an ancient Vorthack whose blue scales had faded to silver with age, leaned forward in her floating seat. "Admiral, your report suggests these humans possess technology that can manipulate matter at a quantum level. How is this possible for a species we've never encountered before?" "That's what we're trying to determine, Counselor Prime. Our xenobiologists have no record of any species matching their description. It's as if they appeared from nowhere, fully armed and ready for war." "Perhaps they're refugees from beyond the galactic rim," suggested Counselor Velthok, a crystalline being whose body rang like wind chimes when he spoke. "Fleeing from some disaster in their home regions." Crexthon shook his head grimly. "Evidence suggests otherwise, Counselor. Intelligence reports indicate these humans have been operating in our space for some time, conducting reconnaissance missions we never detected. They know our technology, our tactics, even our ship designs better than we know theirs." The chamber erupted in worried chatter as the implications sank in. If these humans had been spying on the hegemony for years without detection, what else might they know? "Silence!" Counselor Prime Thexandra commanded, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems. "Admiral, what is your assessment of their military capabilities?" "Based on initial contact, they possess faster-than-light travel comparable to our own, directed energy weapons that can penetrate our best shielding, and boarding techniques that can neutralize a heavy cruiser in minutes. But their most concerning capability is their quantum disruption technology. We have no defense against weapons that can simply make matter cease to exist." A new voice spoke from the upper galleries, where representatives of the hegemony's client species sat. It belonged to Zaraketh, a member of the Talaxian Confederation whose people had been among the first to accept hegemony protection 3 centuries ago. "Honored Council, perhaps we should consider negotiation. If these humans are as advanced as the Admiral suggests, maybe we can reach an accommodation." The suggestion was met with immediate opposition from several quarters. Counselor Mordak, whose Krularian people served as the hegemony's primary military contractors, slammed his armored fist on his speaking podium. "Accommodation? These aliens have destroyed our ships and killed our personnel. They must be taught that such actions have consequences." "And how do you propose we teach them, Counselor?" asked Thexandra dryly. "Our most experienced battle group just lost half its ships to 57 human vessels."
Unless you're volunteering the entire Krularian fleet for a suicide mission.
Before Mordak could respond, a priority alert chimed through the chamber's communication systems. Admiral Krexthon activated his personal communicator and listened for several moments, his expression growing darker with each word. "Counselors," he announced when the transmission ended, "we've just received reports from the Altair, Vega, and Wolf 359 systems. All hegemony installations in those regions are under attack. The humans aren't limiting their operations to the outer rim, they're striking deep into our core territories." The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of the crisis became clear. Those 3 systems housed major military shipyards, resource processing facilities, and administrative centers. If they fell, the economic impact alone would cripple entire sectors of hegemony space. "How many ships?" Thexandra asked quietly. "Unknown. Our communication networks in those regions have been completely severed. Whatever they're using to jam our signals is more sophisticated than anything we've seen before." What the Admiral didn't know was that the humans weren't jamming the hegemony's communications, they were intercepting and analyzing every transmission in real time. 40 years of preparation had included developing quantum computers capable of breaking any encryption the hegemony could devise, along with communication protocols that remained completely undetectable to alien sensors. In the Wolf 359 system, Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Retribution, watching as the final hegemony defense platform was reduced to scrap metal by her ship's quantum disruptors. Unlike the alien vessels with their flowing organic designs, human ships were built for war, angular, armored, and bristling with weapons that could reshape matter itself. "Status report," she ordered. "All primary targets neutralized, Commander," replied her tactical officer. "The shipyards are gone, and we've captured the administrative complex intact. Intelligence teams are already downloading their databases. Casualties? Minimal on our side. The hegemony defenders weren't prepared for our boarding tactics. Most surrendered once we demonstrated our capabilities." Elena nodded, studying the tactical display that showed her battle group's positions throughout the system. Each human ship was exactly where it needed to be, their movements coordinated by artificial intelligence systems that could process battlefield information faster than any biological brain. "Commander," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the administrative complex. One of their officials wants to speak with you directly." "Put it through." The holographic display in front of Elena's command chair activated, showing a tall, bird-like alien with iridescent feathers and large, dark eyes. The being's translator collar identified him as Administrator Kekthal of the Avian Collective, one of the hegemony's client species. "Human Commander," Kekthal said, his voice carrying a musical quality even through the translation device, "I am authorized to offer the immediate surrender of all hegemony forces in this system in exchange for guaranteed safe passage for non-combatant personnel." Elena studied the alien's body language, noting the subtle signs of fear in his posture. "Administrator, you're in no position to negotiate terms. Your fleet is destroyed, your defenses are down, and your communications are cut. Why should I make any deals with you?" "Because," Kekthal said, straightening slightly, "not all of us chose to be here. My people were integrated into the hegemony 200 years ago. We had no say in their policies of expansion and exploitation." It was exactly the kind of response Elena had been hoping for. Human intelligence had spent decades analyzing hegemony internal communications, and they knew that many of the client species were essentially enslaved populations who had been conquered and forced into service. "Tell me about the slave colonies," Elena said simply. Kekthal's feathers rustled with surprise. "How do you know about Dash? We know about all of it. The forced labor camps, the children taken from their families to work in the factories, the entire populations relocated to make room for hegemony resource extraction. We know because we've been watching you for 40 years. The alien administrator was silent for a long moment, clearly processing the implications of Elena's words. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "If you know about the camps, then you know that billions of sentient beings are suffering under hegemony rule. But striking at military targets won't free them. The slave colonies are heavily defended, and any rescue attempt would result in massive casualties among the prisoners." Elena smiled grimly. Administrator, you're thinking like someone who plays by the old rules.
We're going to show you what happens when someone refuses to accept that might makes right.
She activated her ship's communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies.
Attention all beings in the Wolf 359 system. This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Colonial Defense Force. As of this moment, this system is under human protection.
Any individual being held against their will, forced to work without fair compensation, or prevented from leaving by threat of force is hereby declared free. The transmission continued, but Elena switched to a private channel with her fleet commanders. All ships, initiate liberation protocol. Target the slave barracks security systems, but avoid harming the prisoners.
Quantum disruptors on minimum yield, we want to disable their restraint systems, not vaporize the entire facility.
What happened next became known as the miracle of Wolf 359, though the hegemony called it something very different. Human Marines, equipped with powered armor and armed with weapons that could punch through any known material, began teleporting directly into the slave colonies scattered across the system's planets and moons. But, instead of the brutal assault the hegemony expected, the humans moved with surgical precision. They disabled guard posts, opened locked doors, and provided medical aid to prisoners who had been injured or malnourished. Most importantly, they didn't force anyone to leave, they simply gave them the choice. For beings who had been enslaved for generations, the concept of choice was revolutionary. On the third moon of Wolf 359's primary planet, a young Talaxian named Caravel stood in the doorway of her family's assigned quarters, staring at the human marine who had just informed her she was free to leave. The human was tall by her species standards, wearing dark armor that seemed to absorb light, but his voice had been gentle when he spoke. "I don't understand," she said in heavily accented Standard Galactic.
"Free to go where?"
The human, whose armor displayed the name Rodriguez, knelt down to bring himself closer to her eye level.
"Anywhere you want. We have transport ships that can take you to any system in the galaxy.
Or if you prefer, you can stay here and help us establish a new government for this world, one that serves the people who live on it instead of the hegemony." "But, the overseers," Caravel said, glancing nervously toward the administrative complex where the hegemony officials lived. "They'll punish us if we try to leave." "No," Rodriguez said firmly.
"They won't.
The overseers have been removed from power. The only authority on this world now is the Provisional Council we're helping to establish, made up of representatives from all the different species who live here." It took several hours for the reality to sink in for most of the former slaves. Generations of conditioning had taught them that resistance was impossible, that the hegemony's power was absolute. But, as they watched human Marines dismantling the security systems that had kept them imprisoned, as they saw their former overseers being escorted to ships that would take them back to hegemony space, something fundamental began to change. For the first time in their lives, they had hope.
Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of star systems as human forces struck deep into hegemony territory.
But, the liberation of slave colonies was only one part of humanity's strategy. The other part was far more subtle and, in many ways, more devastating to hegemony power. In the Rigel system, Dr. James Park stood in what had once been the hegemony's primary xenobiological research facility, examining data files that contained information about every species the aliens had encountered in 3 millennia of expansion. But, unlike the clinical, detached reports he had expected, what he found was a detailed catalog of exploitation. Each species file contained not just biological data, but psychological profiles designed to determine the most effective methods of control. Which species responded to physical intimidation, which could be manipulated through economic dependence, which would submit if their leaders were replaced with hegemony-approved officials. "My God," he whispered as he read through the files. "They've turned conquest into a science." His assistant, Dr. Sarah Kim, looked up from her own terminal.
"It gets worse, James. Look at this."
She transferred her data to the main display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with thousands of star systems marked in different colors.
"Red systems are those under direct hegemony control," she explained. "Yellow are client species with limited autonomy.
Green are what they call observation targets, species that haven't been contacted yet but are marked for future integration." James stared at the display in horror. There were hundreds of green markers scattered across the galactic rim, each one representing a civilization that had no idea they were being watched and evaluated for potential conquest.
How many species are we talking about?
According to these files, the hegemony has catalogued over 3,000 sentient species across the galaxy.
Less than 50 are considered full members with equal rights.
The rest are either enslaved, controlled, or marked for future acquisition.
The implications were staggering.
If these records were accurate, the hegemony wasn't just another galactic power, they were a cancer that had been growing across the galaxy for millennia, consuming every form of life they encountered. James activated his communication device and opened a channel to Earth Command. "This is Dr. Park at Rigel Station.
I'm transmitting the complete hegemony xenobiological database. Command needs to see this immediately. We're not just fighting a war against an aggressive neighbor, we're fighting to save every free civilization in the galaxy." The response from Earth came within hours.
Admiral Rebecca Chen, the architect of humanity's military strategy, appeared on the communication screen with an expression of grim determination.
"Dr. Park, we've reviewed your data. How confident are you in its accuracy?"
"Very confident, Admiral. We've cross-referenced it with intelligence gathered from liberated colonies, and everything matches."
The hegemony has been systematically conquering and enslaving entire civilizations for over 3,000 years. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. "Then, it's time for Phase 2 of the Liberation Protocol.
We're going to contact every species on their observation list and offer them a choice: join us in fighting the hegemony, or accept our protection while they build up their own defenses."
"Admiral, with respect, that's a massive undertaking. We're talking about potentially thousands of first contact scenarios across hundreds of light years of space."
"Dr. Park, 40 years ago, a single encounter with a hegemony survey ship changed the entire course of human civilization. We learned that there were monsters hiding in the dark between the stars, and we decided to become something even more terrifying to protect ourselves and others."
The Admiral's expression softened slightly.
"We've spent 4 decades preparing for this war, not just by building ships and weapons, but by developing the diplomatic, logistical, and technological infrastructure needed to coordinate a galaxy-wide resistance movement. Every simulation we ran, every contingency plan we developed, was designed for exactly this moment." The transmission paused as Admiral Chen consulted something off-screen, then continued. "We're not just going to defeat the hegemony, Dr. Park.
We're going to make sure that nothing like them ever rises again.
But, to do that, we need allies, lots of them. And, thanks to your work, we now know exactly where to find them." As the call ended, Dr. Park looked back at the display showing the thousands of star systems under hegemony control. Each one represented billions of lives that had been crushed under the weight of alien oppression. But, for the first time in galactic history, those lives had something they'd never had before.
They had humanity. And humanity, as the galaxy was beginning to learn, didn't believe in accepting the unacceptable.
6 months after the first human attacks, the Hegemony Council met in emergency session deep within the fortress moon of Taithkara Prime, their ancient capital that had stood unconquered for over 2 millennia. But, today, the massive stone chambers that had once echoed with the confident pronouncements of galactic rulers were filled with the desperate whispers of beings who had suddenly discovered they were not the apex predators they had believed themselves to be.
Counselor Prime Fexandra looked far older than her 4 centuries as she called the session to order.
Reports of human attacks had flooded in from across hegemony space, and each one told the same story: swift, overwhelming victory followed by the immediate liberation of any enslaved populations. "Intelligence report," she commanded wearily. Admiral Krexthon stepped forward, his uniform now bearing the modifications that indicated a wartime command structure. "The situation continues to deteriorate, Counselor Prime. We've lost direct control of 47 star systems, with 30 more reporting active human presence.
Conservative estimates suggest we've lost over 60% of our slave labor force to liberation efforts."
The chamber erupted in concerned chatter.
The hegemony's economy had been built on the foundation of enslaved labor for millennia. Without that foundation, entire sectors of their civilization would collapse within years.
"What about our defensive measures?" asked Counselor Velfak, his crystalline form resonating with anxiety.
"Surely our fortress worlds can hold against these humans?" Admiral Crexthon's expression grew even grimmer. 3 hours ago, the humans attacked Fortress Kethmoran in the Altair system.
It was considered impregnable asteroid-based defenses, automated weapon platforms, shield generators powered by the system's star itself.
And
they destroyed it in 17 minutes without losing a single ship. The silence that followed was deafening. Fortress Kethmoran had been the site of the hegemony's victory over the Andromedan Rebellion 2 centuries earlier, where a force of 500 warships had been held off for 6 months by the fortress's defenses.
How? Thexandra asked quietly. They didn't attack the fortress directly, Crexthon explained, activating a holographic display that showed the tactical breakdown. Instead, they used their quantum disruptors to destabilize the asteroid's atomic structure.
The entire fortress simply fell apart. 15 million tons of rock and metal turned to cosmic dust in seconds.
And the garrison? Evacuated. The humans gave them 30 minutes to abandon the fortress before beginning their attack. Every escape pod and transport was allowed to leave unmolested. It was a pattern that had emerged across every human attack.
They struck with overwhelming force and advanced technology, but they went to extraordinary lengths to minimize casualties among both military personnel and civilian populations. It was a type of warfare that the hegemony had never encountered before, one that seemed more concerned with dismantling systems of oppression than simply accumulating body counts.
What do our xenobiologists say about their psychology? Asked Counselor Mordak.
Every species we've encountered follows predictable patterns of aggression and territorial expansion.
What drives these humans?
The question was answered by Dr. Zethkala, a Vorthack scientist whose team had been analyzing captured human communications and equipment. She approached the speaking platform with the uncertain gait of someone bringing unwelcome news. Honored counselors, our analysis suggests that human psychology is fundamentally different from any species we've previously encountered. They appear to possess what they call empathy, an ability to understand and share the emotional states of other beings, even those from completely different species.
Empathy? Mordak scoffed. How can a warrior species possess such a weakness?
Counselor, we believe this trait may actually be their greatest strength, Dr. Zethkala replied. It allows them to form alliances with species that should be natural enemies, to understand the motivations of their opponents, and to design strategies that account for the welfare of non-combatants. She activated her own holographic display, showing psychological profiles compiled from interrogations of captured hegemony personnel. In every case, humans who have taken prisoners have provided medical care, adequate food, and have allowed captured personnel to communicate with their families. This behavior is unprecedented in our military experience. You're describing them as if they're benevolent, Counselor Velthok observed. But they've destroyed our fleets and dismantled our infrastructure across dozens of systems. Yes, but only infrastructure related to oppression and exploitation. They've left civilian populations, medical facilities, and educational institutions completely untouched. In some cases, they've actually improved conditions for civilian populations by providing advanced medical supplies and communication equipment. The implications of Dr. Zethkala's report send waves of unease through the assembled council members. An enemy that fought with honor was one thing, but an enemy that seemed genuinely committed to improving the lives of their victims was something else entirely.
What about their military capabilities? Admiral Crexthon asked. Do we have any hope of matching their technology? Dr. Zethkala's hesitation told them everything they needed to know before she spoke.
Admiral, our analysis of captured human equipment suggests they've achieved a level of technological integration that we previously thought impossible. Their quantum manipulation technology, their artificial intelligence systems, their weapons and propulsion, everything is designed to work together as a unified whole. She pulled up technical schematics that showed the internal structure of a human assault rifle.
This is a standard infantry weapon.
It contains more processing power than most of our Starship computers, can adapt its ammunition type based on target analysis, and maintains constant communication with other weapons in its unit.
Their equipment doesn't just function, it thinks. Are you saying they've created artificial intelligence?
Thexandra asked, her scales rippling with concern.
Not created, Counselor Prime. Partnered with. Our analysis suggests that human artificial intelligence systems are treated as equals rather than tools.
They make decisions collaboratively rather than through traditional command hierarchies.
The concept was so alien to hegemony thinking that several council members needed their translators to repeat the explanation.
In their experience, artificial intelligence was either a useful tool or a dangerous threat to be controlled. The idea that a biological species might willingly share decision-making authority with artificial minds was revolutionary. That explains their tactical superiority, Admiral Crexthon mused. If their ships are making decisions at the speed of electronic thought while coordinating with biological intuition, they can respond to changing battlefield conditions faster than any purely biological command structure.
Admiral, Thexandra said, in your professional military opinion, do we have any chance of winning a conventional war against these humans?
The Admiral's silence stretched for nearly a minute before he finally answered.
No, Counselor Prime. They're not just more advanced than us, they're fighting a completely different kind of war.
We've built our military strategy around conquering and controlling territory. They're fighting to dismantle systems of oppression wherever they find them.
Even if we could match their technology, we can't match their motivation. The truth was even more complex than Admiral Crexthon realized.
While the Council debated their diminishing options, human forces were already implementing the next phase of their galactic strategy. In the Vega system, Captain Maria Santos stood before an assembly of representatives from 17 different species, all of whom had been liberated from hegemony rule in the past month. The gathering was taking place aboard the human diplomatic vessel Harmony, a ship specifically designed for first contact and interspecies cooperation. Friends, she began, her words being simultaneously translated into 17 different languages, you've all experienced the hegemony's idea of galactic order.
Today, we want to offer you something different.
The holographic display behind her showed a map of the galaxy with hundreds of star systems highlighted in blue.
These are systems that have declared independence from hegemony rule with human assistance. Each one is governed by representatives chosen by the people who actually live there.
Each one has the right to determine its own economic policies, social structures, and relationships with other worlds. A tall, insectoid being from the Chithari delegation raised one of his four arms. Captain Santos, this sounds like the formation of a rival power block.
How is your alliance different from the hegemony? An excellent question, Delegate Vextral, Maria replied. The difference is choice.
Every member of what we're calling the Free Worlds Alliance has the absolute right to leave at any time, for any reason. No one is forced to contribute resources they can't spare, no one is required to adopt political systems they don't want, and no one is subject to rules they didn't have a voice in creating. Another delegate, this one from a species that looked like living crystal formations, spoke up.
But, surely you expect some form of mutual defense agreement? The hegemony will not simply allow this rebellion to succeed. Maria smiled. Defense is certainly important, but not in the way you might expect.
Every species that joins the alliance receives access to human defensive technology and training, but the choice of how to use those resources remains entirely your own. She gestured to the technical advisor standing beside her, Dr. Lisa Park, whose team had been developing the technological packages offered to new alliance members.
Dr. Park, would you explain the defensive technology transfer?
Certainly, Dr. Park said, activating a new holographic display. We provide 3 basic packages. First, personal protection, force fields, emergency medical systems, and communication devices that can reach help anywhere in the galaxy. Second, planetary defense, shield generators, early warning systems, and automated defensive platforms. Third, space-based defense, ship designs, weapons systems, and training for your own space-based forces. The key point, Maria added, is that all of this technology becomes yours. We don't maintain control over it, we don't demand payment for it, and we don't require that you use it in any specific way. Our only request is that you don't use it to oppress others. The delegates looked at each other with expressions of wonder and disbelief. The concept of more advanced beings offering technology freely, without strings attached, was so foreign to their experience that many of them struggled to believe it was real.
Captain, said a delegate whose species resembled feathered reptiles, what do humans gain from this arrangement?
Surely you don't expend these resources out of pure altruism.
That's where you're wrong, Maria replied.
We do exactly that, because we've learned something that the hegemony never understood: oppression anywhere threatens freedom everywhere. Every enslaved population, every conquered world, every being forced to live under rules they didn't choose, each one makes the galaxy a little darker for everyone. She paused to let her words be translated, then continued. Humans spent 40 years preparing for this war, not because we wanted to conquer territory or accumulate resources, but because we refused to live in a galaxy where might makes right. We believe that every sentient being has the right to determine their own destiny, and we're willing to fight for that principle. The session continued for several hours as delegates asked detailed questions about alliance membership, technological transfers, and defensive agreements. But the most important moment came at the end, when the Chithari delegate Vexthral asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Captain Santos, assuming our species choose to join this alliance, what happens when the hegemony inevitably counterattacks? Their remaining forces still outnumber yours by a significant margin. Maria's smile was confident but not arrogant. Delegate Vexthral, you're thinking in terms of the old kind of warfare, fleet versus fleet, world versus world. But this isn't that kind of war. She activated a final display showing communication intercepts from across hegemony space. While we've been meeting here, similar gatherings are taking place in 47 other star systems. Hundreds of species are learning about the alliance and choosing to join. More importantly, populations still under hegemony rule are learning that resistance is possible. The display showed message traffic between human ships and resistance movements on dozens of worlds still nominally under hegemony control. The hegemony's power has always been based on the belief that their rule was inevitable, that resistance was futile. But that illusion is crumbling. Every liberated world, every successful defense against hegemony forces, every new species that joins the alliance proves that their system isn't unstoppable. Dr. Park added, we estimate that within 6 months, the hegemony will be facing active resistance movements on over 300 worlds simultaneously. They simply don't have the military resources to suppress that level of widespread rebellion. And if they try, Maria concluded, they'll be fighting not just human forces, but a galaxy-wide coalition of species that have finally realized they outnumber their oppressors by millions to one. The implications of humanity's strategy were staggering. Instead of simply trying to outfight the hegemony, they were systematically dismantling the psychological foundations of hegemony power. By proving that resistance was possible, by offering technological assistance to anyone willing to fight for their freedom, and by demonstrating that advanced civilizations could exist without oppression, humans were inspiring a galactic revolution. The meeting concluded with 15 of the 17 species voting to join the Free Worlds Alliance. The 2 holdouts species whose governments were still heavily influenced by hegemony propaganda were provided with the same technological packages anyway, along with an open invitation to reconsider their decision at any time. As the delegates prepared to return to their home worlds with the news, Captain Santos received a priority communication from Admiral Chen at Earth Command. Maria, we just intercepted hegemony military communications from their capital system. They're recalling all their frontier fleets and consolidating their forces for what they're calling a final offensive against human space. How many ships are we talking about, Admiral? Conservative estimates suggest over 3,000 vessels of various classes, including their entire dreadnought fleet. They're planning to strike at Earth itself. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. 3,000 ships represented the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Even with humanity's technological advantages, defending against that kind of assault would be a monumental challenge. Admiral, what are our chances? Admiral Chen's smile was visible even through the holographic transmission. Maria, they're still thinking in terms of the old kind of warfare. They want to destroy our home world and break our will to fight. What they don't realize is that we stopped being just an Earth-based species about 6 months ago. Ma'am? We've established permanent colonies in over 200 star systems, Maria. We have shipyards, research facilities, and military bases scattered across 1,000 light-years of space. Even if they somehow managed to destroy Earth, which they won't, humanity would continue to exist as a galactic civilization. The Admiral's expression grew more serious. But, more importantly, they're not just attacking humanity anymore. Every species in the Alliance, every liberated world, every resistance movement across the galaxy has a stake in this fight.
When the hegemony attacks Earth, they'll be declaring war on the entire concept of freedom. And what happens when billions of oppressed beings across the galaxy realize they can fight back? Admiral Chen's smile returned.
That, Captain, is when the galaxy finally learns what happens when you threaten not just a single species, but the very idea that sentient beings have the right to determine their own destiny. As the communication ended, Maria looked out at the stars surrounding the Vega system, knowing that in each point of light, the seeds of revolution were taking root. The hegemony thought they were fighting a war against a single aggressive species, but they were actually fighting something far more dangerous, the fury of an entire galaxy that had finally decided it would no longer accept chains. The final phase of the war was about to begin, and, for the first time in galactic history, the oppressed would outnumber their oppressors not just in bodies, but in hope.